Richard in Lake Placid, Florida, an independent there. Hi, Richard.
Yes, good morning, Greta.
Good morning.
Good morning, Representative Pearce.
Good morning.
Greta, I would love to see C-SPAN do a segment on why Homeland Security is ordering so much live ammunition, 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition. They rarely shoot their gun, or fire a weapon, in their line of duty. And also ordering all these small tanks. There's something going on that the public out here doesn't know about. I would like to see C-SPAN, do something on this. Get somebody on there that can explain why this administration needs all this ammunition and weapons. And but Mr. Pearce, the GOP needs to reach out to the voter called conservative. That's what they missed last election. Last time they did anything was midterm elections, 2010, when the Tea Party put the midterm congressmen in office and took control of the House. They're reaching out to minorities. It seems to me that the GOP is trying to be the little brother, the protege of the Democratic Party. Big government, more spending.
I think that Richard is hitting a chord that is very vibrant. The everyday working man and woman, the person that just raises her family correctly, feels completely abandoned right now. The conservative values of balancing your checkbook at home should be extended to the federal government. We should live by the same rules in government that each family has to live by. We can't continue as a government to spend money that we don't have, to borrow from China, to print money. The Federal Reserve is printing about 60% of last year's deficit. The year before it was 70%. And so people are alarmed that we're not doing the basics of conservatism, that is living within our means. I think that Richard has a compelling point that we must be talking to the voters who are simply alarmed about the economic future for themselves and for their families. That's one of the reasons that you see a few of us in the House standing very strong on these issues of budget, the deficit, the sequestration, or whatever.
Peter in Bolton, Connecticut, Democratic caller.
Yes. Very rarely do I ever hear a Republican congressman as measured and sensible and reasonable as Representative Pearce. But it seems to me there's one big dark spot in his thinking. He just, with the last caller, brought it up. And that's, I put it this way. Back, Isaac Newton really gave us something to think about physics, but you'd never be able to build an atomic bomb or a reactor without the 20th century Einstein. About the same time as Newton, we had Adam Smith, who laid down the fundamentals of economics. And even Smith knew that there was a difference between nation states and families and companies. But then in the 20th century, of course, we had John Maynard Keynes. And to really lay down the theory and practice, which has been proved now for 80 years or so, that a government must spend to get us out of a hole. And the idea that we need to balance the federal budget every year is totally absurd. Does he know anything about macroeconomics? Can he talk reasonably about the difference between the government and my family?
All right, Congressman?
Yeah, Peter, I really appreciate the opening comments and the compliments, because I think what the country desperately needs are Democrats, Republicans talking together. That's more important than anything else that we should be doing at this point. As far as the Keynesian economics, if you're looking at Europe, looking at this country, you see a process of failure. I don't disagree that there are times when, well, my wife and I had a small business. We grew it significantly, about tenfold in the 10 years we had it. Sometimes we would slide into debt and then we would pay that off. But the idea that you can print money to solve the problems of the deficit are just not working. Take a look at Argentina, if you would, Richard. 100 years ago, they exceeded the U.S. They were like the #2 economy in the world. And then they chose big government, stronger government. And now then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they had an inflation rate of 1,500%. Now that's 1,500% is when you start the year with $150,000 in your checking account and it's worth $10,000 at the end of the year. Same thing's going on in Cyprus right now. They're just going and taking the money, but printing the money in order to balance the budget is I guess would be the question here, is actually taking money out of people's savings accounts and their checking accounts. It's depreciating our ability to pay our bills. And so then we get into the whole idea of the wage price spiral, which we're beginning to see the new conversations on minimum wage. So, but I think that Peter and I could come in. We typically think we as Democrats and Republicans are this far apart. As I sit and talk to Democrats, yeah, there are some areas that we will not ever agree on, but let's close the gap down. And so I think Peter and I could really come to conclusions about these things. Again, appreciated his comments.
A couple of immigration tweets here for you. Congressman Michelle Lanthier says, Representative Pearce, how do you feel about the DREAM Act?
The DREAM Act, I voted against it because it was extremely unfair to people who come legally into the country. In other words, the DREAM Act was set up if you came illegally, you would get in-state tuition no matter where you wanted to go. If you came to the country through the normal channels, then you would have to pay out-of-state tuition. Again, Hispanic families who have been in this country for decades or generations are American citizens. You can't go from New Mexico to New York and get out-of-state tuition. And so basically, the act itself was, in my mind, very unfair. I'm extraordinarily sympathetic to the people who come here, are brought here at a very early age. They're basically American citizens. I just met with a group of them in New Mexico, and my comment was to them is, you figure out how we can stop this from pushing forward and being the same problem 20 years from now, then I'm extremely interested in solving the problem. But to simply go and every few years just legalize them, just to say, okay, got this problem, we're just going to put you on citizenship, then that increases the pressure. In my mind, everything comes to the question, how do you stop the pressure on the border? Living on the border, I'm saying if we've got 70 miles and it's basically wide open, El Paso's in Texas, by the time you get to New Mexico, it's just an open border all the way to Arizona. And we get a lot of the traffic that just steps across the fence and comes in. And so finding out how to stop the desire just to step across that area and come through is one that I think the voters in the 2nd District of New Mexico are pretty concerned with. But thanks for the question, Michelle.
Vivian Shepherdson on Twitter wants to go back to the comments that you made about a guest worker visa, saying, why is it different giving legal status and giving a guest worker visa? Why wouldn't both have a path to citizenship if they want it?
Well, again, if you want to be a citizen and you have to wait 20 years, let's say 20 years to come here, and we're going to have to wait in your country without jobs or wondering if your kids are going to get to go to college, or you could come here illegally, get across the border and work here for the 18 or 20 years that your friends are waiting over there. Who would not want to come here and do that? Again, that's that whole question of we can't secure the whole border when people are trying to feed their families. I'm very sympathetic to the people who are starving and want a better lot for their families. But if you, in the meantime, give them pathways to citizenship, everybody would want to come here. So just separate the streams of traffic, and I think a lot of the problems disappear. And plus, you get the people crossing the border now are at the main check stations where border crossings are needed. Now then, everybody out there on these expanses, unprotected expanses, they're doing illegal things, drugs or guns or whatever, smuggling humans. It's easier to enforce in a different method when people are trying to do illegal things. But if you've got a stream of people who are just coming here to better things for the family right beside the drug runner, enforcement has to be throttled back and you have to be more cautious. So again, it's just a sense of pragmatism that drives my positions.
Independent caller Christine in Clarkston, Michigan. Thanks for waiting, Christine.
Good morning. How are you? I want to talk a little bit about immigration. I have two things. I came from Germany many years ago, and we had to have a sponsor in this country. We had to have a job waiting. And we had to go to school and learn English. We also had to learn American government. And I did every kind of a job. I picked fruit. I worked in canneries. I scrubbed floors, anything and everything to keep our family. There were 5 of us that came over to keep our family going. We bought a house. We went to work, and it was just so thrilling to be in this country, because we were very poor in Germany, that we did anything and everything to be able to stay here legally. Okay, and I don't understand this. People in government keep saying that we don't have enough people to do these mundane jobs. I did them. I didn't suffer for it. It made me a better person.
Okay, Christine, I'll leave it there. Have the congressman respond.
Sure. Again, Christine is talking about a time when a lot of people, even the Hispanics, I hear this frequently, can't we go back to those days of the Bracero program where if you came here, you had to have somebody that was going to hire you, and then once you don't have that job, then you can go back and forth pretty easily. And that's something that has a lot of appeal to it, the idea that people would come here and do anything. That's the community I grew up in. My father was just on the bottom end of the economic spectrum in the oil field. He was the roustabout, the entry level. He had been a dry land farmer when I was born, went broke doing that, and they were just trying to feed the family. So I grew up, there were braceros that were living right around the south. We lived outside the town, and so the poor people of town lived out there, and we all did the same thing. I started my first job at 9, working out in the fields. We then started working at 10 in town because I could get better pay there. 6 kids in the family, all of us raised the same, and so Christine and I share a similar background. But I'm just telling you today, Christine, that I hear employers every day in New Mexico, 8% unemployment, saying we can't find workers. It's a huge problem.
Gary Duncan on Twitter. Do other countries proportionately take in as many legal immigrants as the United States does? How long does it take in those countries?
I don't know an answer to that. I will tell you that immigration is much less in other nations than it is here. And people are coming to grips with the fact that we only have a certain number of jobs, and you can only put so many people trying to get those jobs before you have deep economic problems, and that's what we're facing now. If we look at the math on the Reagan era, they thought there were 1 million people. We're going to give them citizenship. We're going to get amnesty. We're going to calm this thing down, and that's a very pragmatic approach. Instead of 1, they actually processed 3.5, so 3.5 for every one they thought, and then each one of those brought 5. So that was 15 million people when the government thought it was a 1 million person problem. Now today there's 11, and if we do the 3 expansion, that's 33. And then if each one brings 5, you're talking about 150 million people. We do not have 150 million jobs. That means that unemployment, welfare, TANF, food stamps, they're going to skyrocket. And so this budget that we're already wrestling with has the potential to get much worse. That's one reason that everybody that is worried about the deficit is saying, wait, let's slow down, let's do some math here, let's figure out how many we can have in the country.